What's going on, Winnipeg fans all across the US and Canada? This is the Winnipeg Terminal. You are now boarding. I'm Mike D'Andrea. This is Joe Pritchard. How we doing, Joe?
Just living the dream.
We were talking right before the show started about just kind of how busy things have been on the personal front, and well, of course, some of us have a couple jobs that I guess are occupations, and others, well, they may be jobs around the house that have those unannounced victories, so to speak. So yeah, it's just been a pretty busy stretch as of late, hasn't it?
Yeah, and the wheel keeps on turning too. Bombers have news coming out every day. The Jets are back in action. They've got three more games in a 4-day stretch coming up here, so we'll have a lot to talk about. It's just kind of hard for us to keep up lately, isn't it, Ben?
Oh, absolutely. And, there's a reason why today, of course, we had to postpone the show a day. Yesterday, Valentine's Day, kind of a day to spend with family. But the good news out of that is that we have another game to dissect that actually went our way. So it just kind of played out in our favor that we did postpone the show for a day. But we'll kind of dive into that in just a bit. But first, I think the thing that we should start out with is what I referred to as the tomfoolery in the Battle of Ontario. So, my, I mean, everybody's been asking, "Oh, what are your thoughts? Like, was this warranted for Morgan Riley to do this?" And you know, I'll just kind of get my thoughts out in the air, and then I'll ask yours, Joe. But I like the idea. I mean, it's that's not the first time that an empty netter has been flashy. But I like that he was the frustration was there, the passion was there. But all of that said, you still have to control your stick. And he did get the shoulder first. I'll say that much. But when you're kind of driving your stick up like that and you hit a shoulder, it's pretty inevitable that you're going to get someone in the head. And much like we talked last week about Dilly Dilly with the hit to the head that may or may not have actually warranted a 5 game suspension like Morgan Riley got. But it's something that Dylan's was a little different because it was kind of in the heat of the moment, so to speak, the speed of the game. And he didn't really look to intentionally go for the head, but it was a hit to the head nonetheless, which again is something that the league is trying to avoid. Whereas Morgan Riley kind of just went straight for the head. I mean, to me, it warrants the 5 gamer, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that too.
Well, I think it could have been handled a completely different way. You know that the flashy goal was meant to irritate you. The player that scored the flashy goal has already got the reputation of a guy that's going to try to get under your skin. The best thing you can do in that situation, let him be out there, show what he's about, and don't do anything. Because I guarantee you the rest of the league is watching and they don't like it either. Why put yourself in a position where you have to take the punishment for something that the rest of the league is going to help you deal with later on? Because they're not going to like what the guy did either. And they're
Hmm.
going to keep that in their mental memory bank. But instead you threw yourself in the crosshairs of the league discipline by going and doing something that you can't defend, even though the code says you're justified by doing it. Like, everybody knows that the flashy goal was obviously there to irritate you, but nobody in the league is going to tolerate that, and he's going to pay for it across the league. No, he's going to have that extra bump in the corner every time he
Hmm.
plays now because they know because everybody knows that when he gets the chance, he's going to do things to irritate you. Really, he kind of reminds me of Sean Avery. Just a perfect yeah.
Oh
Maybe
man.
maybe too far, maybe that's too far right now, but, like, that's exactly what he's trying to do, is to get under your skin and make you do something stupid so that your team is penalized and his team has the advantage from that. Don't
Just
buy
makes
into
me
it,
think that does that make Morgan Riley Nigel Dawes?
possibly, but, like, don't. don't fall for it. The code is there. Yes, you're upset. The rest of the league is watching too. They know what he's about. Don't hurt your own self.
That's fair. Who? Oh man, I wish that I can remember. The name is escaping me, and I know that one of the viewers are going to be like, how do you not know this?" But um, it was someone from Washington years ago that on an empty netter. I think this was
Oh,
actually.
Dale Hunter, you're talking about.
There we go. Okay, so just waits at the front of the net and waits and waits, and no one's coming. And I think was that game against Ottawa.
I want to say I forget if he hit Turgeon or LaFontaine off the top of my head, but it was a star player he hit too.
Mm-hmm.
If we're thinking of the same thing, anyway.
I think I was thinking of something different. But now
Possibly.
I know where you're going with
So
this.
I'm going in a different direction, which is okay.
Yes. So and that'll happen at times. But anyways, so I wish that I could play the clip, but he basically stopped right in front of the net and waited for anyone to show up, and because they weren't chasing him, it was free empty net. He's strides ahead of anyone,
Yeah.
and he just
Totally
like
on a
waits
different
there
page than I was, which is fine.
and just tosses it right in, like waiting at the goal line until someone shows up and then tosses it in. But I mean that wouldn't be so. It wasn't like that was the first uh, slap in the face sort of empty net goal. But then I saw something else on Facebook that was like there was so many other ways that he could have went with that. He
No,
could have done the Michigan, just go behind the net, do the Michigan. There was another one they called it the pre-celly. So start your celly on the way in and then just tap it in. And
or
I
like the
mean, not
pool cue. Use the butt end of the stick as a pool cue.
yeah. And not that I advocate for all of that, but I mean, some of
Also,
those
we'd sit there
things
and laugh
are.
our ass off if we saw it live. So
Oh, if
why
I
not?
saw that live, I'd be on that like white on rice.
Mm,
But
right.
what?
That might cause an old fashioned line brawl.
Oh, absolutely. Remember the line brawl of when Torts was in Vancouver against Calgary? Oh man, that would probably escalate to that proportion where Torts was going into Calgary's locker room, and I I like to watch the guys on the ice go at it, but like we're deviating like we always do, but like Torts, in my opinion, was way out of line to try to go into their locker room and pick fights. Like if you want to
Yeah,
even go,
usually not the wisest move to come off the field of play
yeah,
to
like because
continue
all bets
something
are
that
off.
happened there. Yep.
And I mean, like, even if you wanted to go to the other bench, not that I think that that's wise either, but I think it's at least smarter to maybe go to the other bench instead of trying to go into their locker room. Just a thought.
Well,
But
I mean, this is also a league where players have climbed into the stands and hit people with shoes, so nothing's off
hey,
the
Mike
table,
Milbury, how
really,
we
is it?
doing?
Mhm.
Well, this kind of, I think it's a perfect segue because we're talking Mike Milbury. And I wanted to get this out here because I haven't even cracked my non alcoholic beer yet because it's still midway through February. And like we said, I talked myself into another dry month. I always like to advertise what beer I'm drinking. And this one's not my typical Bush Light or Bush NA, rather, or even the Blue Moon NA. I was at Milwaukee Burger in Eau Claire, and I'm friends with the general manager there. She comes up to me and says that they have this new non-alcoholic beer that's from Sam Adams called Just a Haze. So I got it right here, and I'm not much for IPAs. I mean, I'll have like one. I do enjoy one or two tops, but then I guess to me it just gets a little too bitter to have more than say two. But this is one that if you put a regular IPA in front of me and then you put this one right next to it and told me which one is the non-alcoholic version, I wouldn't be able to tell you. It's pretty incredible. actually.
which means
So kudos to
they've
Sam
done
Adams.
it right. Hmm.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I don't think Sam Adams can brew a bad beer if they tried, but I think it's one of my favorite breweries, and Oktoberfest there. I put that up with Liney's, and everybody that knows me knows how partial I am to Leinenkugels, based right out of our hometown.
Hmm. See, I was in a rush to get here and get going, so I still have my coffee going.
Sometimes you
No,
need that.
I was at the fan appreciation right after the Banjo Bowl, and they were handing these out to everybody walking by, just like, here, have one. Here, have two. I brought home two, and I own zero. I'm actually borrowing this from my wife.
That sounds like something that would happen in the Dandria house too.
Yep, all those videos about, hey, look, I have 6 different containers of fluids open. Yeah, I know all about that.
Well, we were saying earlier too about how we have a little extra content to talk about today since we did postpone it a day. So I want to dive right into the bit of a turnaround that the boys are showing. So first off, let's just talk about the game last night against San Jose. Now, at face value, this was something that we discussed before the show. At face value, 1-0 against the San Jose Sharks at home looks very disappointing. Yes, it was a shutout. That's great. But if you look at nothing else besides the score, 1-0, you're like, why did we not blow them out? Why was it such a close game? But then you look at some of the
Especially when there's been trouble scoring goals lately to begin with.
yes. And now you look at other stats that are at play, no pun intended, of course. And the one that kind of stuck out to me the most, of course, when I woke up this morning, I didn't get to watch the game. I kind of go to bed a little early, but the thing that blew me away was the shots on goal and the difference that there was. It was actually pretty incredible to see the boys put up 39 shots on goal and only give up 17, even if it's against a team like San Jose. They're still NHL caliber players, and to see someone who's not always on the score sheet being the one who scored the lone goal, that's very pleasing to see as well. Because while our guys like Kyle Connor or Mark Scheifele or whomever, they weren't necessarily on the score sheet scoring goals, but our depth players are getting the job done. That's something you want to see, especially when scoring is an issue, even for your normal top goal scorers. Nikolai Ehlers, another one. We talked about his stats last week.
Yeah, and you do want to see more on the score sheet, but the opportunities were there last night.
Oh, for sure.
We reference getting goalied, and we usually when you say that, usually talking about a disappointing loss where you've put up a ton of shots, ton of great opportunities, and the other team's got a couple of squeakers in there, and you can't quite catch up because the other team's goalie is going nuts. Well, that kind of happened last night, and the Jets still won, so I'll take that.
And what's kind of funny is the first star of the game was San Jose's goalie, and rightfully so. But kind of disappointing to not see Morgan Barron in the stars of the game. Scheifele was second star, Sandberg was third star, and well, Sandberg had a really good game too, as did Scheifele. Even though he didn't show up on the score sheet, he still had a very good game. But nonetheless, kind of wish that our boy that scored the lone goal would have ended up there, but it's all right.
Yeah, and it seems like and another player we haven't mentioned yet, Logan Stanley, who is everybody's favorite
Oh
punching bag,
yeah.
basically, seemed to show out. He was doing some of those things you draft a 6'7" defenseman to do. Namely, if you're really lucky, be Zdeno Chara, but I mean that's a once in a generation. But like that's the idea. Be big, be intimidating. He was doing that.
Mm-hmm. And it's nice to see him use his size. That was something that was my biggest gripe about him for the longest time. And I think I actually mentioned this on the show at one point, where the only time that Logan Stanley had used his size in the past was sitting on Kirill Kaprizov. It's about the only time he's ever used his size.
Can't say I mind having Minnesota players um, take some punishment from Winnipeg Jets players. I don't mind
Hmm.
that too much.
You don't
Something
want to
about
see
proximity.
any right. You don't want to see anyone get hurt, but it's any kind of dig that you can take at the fan base, of course, as a Jets fan, taking little tiny digs at the Minnesota fan base, of course, hoping that Kirill Kaprizov is okay, or anyone for that matter, hoping that they're okay, but still taking those tiny little jabs at them is kind of fun, especially like you
Well,
said.
that's rivalries for you.
Yeah, exactly. And Um, then kind of going back to the game that really started this turnaround too. I think this trip back home was really helpful. I mean, the Penguins have always been a team that's really been the thorn in the side of the Jets. No matter how good, bad, indifferent both teams are, the Penguins are always that force that they can't seem to overcome. But they looked very well, especially early on in that game last weekend against the Penguins, and to come out with the dub, a close game, very hard fought in the second and third period, especially. It kind of showed the resilience of this team, and that is what we talked last week about having that hard fought win, whether it's an overtime or a very close game, such as what happened. Um, I think that that's what they needed for this little turnaround. And I am actually pretty excited for these upcoming games that they have coming up in Western Canada.
Yeah, and it's good to be not talking about a losing streak anymore. That was a couple of weeks too long for me. Uh, so a couple games on the right side of the ledger now, and now we're
Hmm.
hoping over the next couple, 3, 4 games that we see one of those games where the Jets decide, oh, that's right, we like to score, so let's put up a few.
Yeah, especially being that upcoming this Saturday is going to be a rough one against Vancouver. They're obviously a very stacked team. They're very good this year, and it's it's going to be hard. Goals for. I mean, thankfully, both of our boys are playing really well between the pipes, but Vancouver in the regular season is second in goals for. They're averaging 3.69 goals per game to Winnipeg's 2.98. Now, that actually puts us 20th in the league as far as goals for, but goals against, we're first, 2.27. And Vancouver, they're fourth. So they're at 2.57 goals against average. So the scoring is really going to have to show up.
Yeah, and it's time. It's been what, almost double-digit games where the Jets haven't been scoring much at all. So hopefully we could deal with the scoring slump in January, February, and we don't have to see it come April. Because if it keeps going like this, that's a pretty easy recipe for finishing third in the Central, losing 4-2 in the first round, and feeling like you didn't get anywhere this year.
When there was a lot of high hopes going at the end of December and early January, kind of like
Oh yeah.
last year.
So
Um,
hopefully it starts going in. Hopefully last night was a reminder that yes, they can score. They will start scoring again. Everything's starting to click again. Let's see how it goes over the next week or so, and we don't have to worry about scoring droughts anymore.
Now, this is going to be something that's very important that the Jets are going to have to make sure that they keep their discipline in check because penalty kill. I mean, we've said special teams has been a real issue. 5v5 hasn't really been much of an issue. In fact, it's been the Jets have been one of the top teams in the league, 5-on-5.
Yeah,
But
we've
special
made our
teams,
jokes about declining penalties before, so
yeah, and they might have to because their power play is an abysmal 15%. That's 26th in the league. Now, again, this is a team that's really struggling to score too. The penalty kill for Vancouver, not great, not bad. 80%. They're right in the middle of the league. They're 15th in the league, so pretty much right in the middle. As far as Vancouver's power play, 24%. That puts them top 10. They're at ninth in the league for power play percentage. And as far as the Jets' penalty kill, also pretty much as bad as their power play percentage. 78% on the penalty kill puts them 24th in the league. So they're not they're going to want to stay disciplined because going on the penalty kill against a team like Vancouver, one of the only power plays that would scare me even more is Edmonton's. I don't care where Edmonton's power play is in the league. They could be 30th in the league, but with the power play units that they have, specifically their first unit, that would scare me no matter what. So
yeah, some sets of players and some certain Connors are very, very good no matter what the numbers say. And if the
exactly.
numbers are low, well, guess what? That's going to come up. So even more reason to be scared.
Mm-hmm. And now the following game, Calgary, maybe not as tough of a test as Vancouver, but playing in the Saddle Dome still going to be a challenge too. Now Calgary, for right now, anyways, things can change up until time these boys play. But they're on a losing streak of one. They're 5-5-0 in their last 10. Winnipeg 4-5-1 in their last 10. So not really any better. But we're riding a 2-game win streak right now. As far as power play between the two teams, equally as abysmal. 15% for Winnipeg, 15% for Calgary. But if you carry decimal places, if you're really trying to split hairs here, Calgary is 27th in the league in power play and Winnipeg 26th. But Calgary's penalty kill is actually very, very good. And in that division, again, going back to Edmonton's power play, you have to have a good penalty kill. They're at 85%, third in the league. Face-off percentage, the Jets are awful as far as where they're standing in the league. 47% puts them at 29. But I shouldn't say awful because there's right around that 50% where, of course, most of the league is. 51% for Calgary face-off percentage puts them at 11. Goals for Calgary, they can find the back of the net a little easier than the Jets. 3.08 goals for per game. But goals against, exactly 3, and that puts them at 13. So that could, and the last time these two teams played back in October, Calgary bested us 5-3. So that was also in Cowtown. So could be a revenge tour.
Yeah, and Calgary has got a lot to play for over these next couple of weeks too before the trade deadline. They got to decide, hey, do we want to see if we can sneak into the playoffs yet, or do we want to unload everything we've got? So
Yeah.
I'm sure that that's the back of their minds as they're going about their business over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, they're 3 points behind St. Louis, but St. Louis has a game in hand against Calgary as well. They've got 55 points in 53 games, whereas St. Louis has 58 in 52 games. So, like you said, they have a lot to play for. And, Money Hands has been back to Calgary since he left, of course, but, it should be, there's always got to be something, of course, we'll never experience this, but the team that gave you your start, your first opportunity, going back to that barn, no matter if it's years down the road, I think there's got to be something special about that. And you're going to want to play harder against that team that did give you that first opportunity.
Yeah, it'd be a great time for a couple of goals out of Monahan for sure. Love to see him start getting hot.
Yeah, I think that a lot of us would like to see that. And we'll have to see how this goes, but I'm pretty optimistic about this road trip. If I were to guess the results of those two games, I would. This is, I say optimistic, but I think that we'll take 3 out of 4 points. I think that the game in Vancouver is going to be very hard fought. I think that will come up short in overtime. But that's not to say that the boys aren't going to give it their all. And I think it's going to be a very good game. And I think the scoring is going to come back for us. Calgary, I think that'll be a hard fought game too. But I think in the end, I think it'll be a 2-goal game is my guess. But what are your thoughts?
I would certainly hope so. And then what is it? In Calgary, and then the next night at home against Minnesota.
Against Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah, that worries me a little bit just for the sake of the back-to-back and a fired-up opponent at the same time.
Yeah, and like we were saying, how Calgary has a lot to play for. Minnesota's tied with Calgary, so they've got 55 points as well. Now their goal differential is a little worse. Calgary is actually dead even as far as goal differential is concerned on the year. Minnesota is minus 11, and so to go up against a team like that when you're struggling to score may bode somewhat well for us, but things have happened before. Stranger things have happened.
Oh yeah, of course. It's just I look at the schedule and go, I'm worried about that one because travel, no rest, and oh by the way, third game in 4 nights against a team that doesn't like us. So they're going to be up
And
for it.
right, and they're also a team that will always play hard, and especially, I mean, they've got some young guns on that team too. Last 5 games, Matt Boldy 7 points. So I mean, that's that's pretty great. And like for example, for us, the last 5 games, Josh Morrissey 2 assists as one of our leaders in the last 5 games. That's how hard scoring has been to come by. But as far as where the Wild are in the last 10 games too, they've won 7 of their last 10. So that is going to be quite the test, especially on the backside of a back-to-back. Now that begs the question: in Calgary, do you start Helly or do you start Brossoit? And then, of course, the flip side on the back-to-back.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's if you're the coach, are you saying I believe do you want to have your backup play on the road against a team not in your division? That might make more sense to me. But then knowing that the home game is against a divisional rival, and so it's more important simply from the standing standpoint. But at the same time, it's also going to be with a team that doesn't have fresh legs in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough.
And
Like if these were flipped, if it was Minnesota Calgary, obviously you start Helly against Minnesota, Brossoit Calgary. But having them flipped like that makes it harder for me to say.
one thing that could play in the Jets' favor is now it's not the night before; it's the afternoon before, much like how we have. Oh, excuse me. We have the matinee against Calgary. Um, Minnesota has a matinee against the Canucks.
Hmm.
So they have a very tough test on the front side of a back to back as well. Now they're at home against Vancouver, but then they go on the road the next day to Canada Life Center, which, as we know, especially when that place sells out, that place can get very loud and it can be a tough place to play. So that could play out in our favor too.
Well, here's hoping.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see the results from each of those games because, well, as we know, going up against Vancouver coming up here in just a couple days, they're a tough team. They're very physical, but they're also going to get you on the score sheet too. So they kind of got that good dynamic going. Um, but yeah, I think this is going to be the test that the Jets need to see if they need to up their game a little bit at the deadline, or if we're just going to kind of stay where we're at. And I wouldn't mind that either if they could play up to their standard that they were showing through most of the season up to that losing streak.
Yep.
Which
I'd just like to see a few crooked numbers on the score sheet. That's all I ask.
I would. I think most of the fan base would. Now that also, I was looking at the standings. What was it yesterday, the day before, and this one kind of stuck out to me because okay, so we know that Edmonton was on a ridiculous winning streak, right? They are still 11th in the league, and even after winning, was it 16 games in a row?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when you actually dissect it and look at the records of some of those teams that they played while they were in the midst of that winning streak, they pulled a Dallas Cowboys, if we're being honest here. They were beating up on all of the bad teams, and then they finally get a a good team. They get a half decent opponent, and they lose. It was Vegas that ended the streak, and it does pain me to say that because I think that you feel the same way about the Vegas Golden Knights as I do.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, Ottawa, Chicago, Detroit, Montreal. Okay, they beat Toronto, Seattle, Calgary, Columbus, Chicago, Nashville. That these were teams that they had in the midst of their winning streak, and then
Ooh, definitely a murderer's row there.
yeah, and then Vegas shows up, beats them 3-1. They go up and beat Anaheim 5-3, and then they lose 4-0. They get blanked by the Kings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so
and yeah, and that streak got them back into the race. It's what they needed to salvage their season, but it also goes to show just how far down they were in October and November to have to do that just to get to where they're at right now.
yeah, that's kind of sad. It does put them third in the Pacific, but mind you, they only have 49 games, so they have 4 games in hand against Vegas, who is in second in the Pacific right now, who's 5 points ahead of them. So if they can get their act together and actually beat the good teams too, they might actually have a pretty good chance at least getting second. If we're being honest, I don't think they're going to catch Vancouver unless they go on another win streak like that. But I think they got it all out of their system because they had a pretty cake schedule at the end of December and most of January.
Yeah, they're not getting that stretch again.
No. So, I mean, it is the way it is. Oh, I guess Joe left. Joe, you still there? No? Okay. So I'll go into what I was saying anyways. But you play, you did. Oh, there you are.
Yep.
Did I leave or did you?
I think we had just a little bit of a hiccup. We're good here.
Hey, it happens. But what I was saying is, it's the old adage: you play who they put in front of you, and you go to each barn at least once. Everyone comes to your barn at least once. But when you get the schedule aligned the way it was for Edmonton, you have to go on a streak like that if you want to be successful because you have to take advantage of that. And they did. So kudos to them. But now, like the Dallas Cowboys, they got to beat the good teams.
Question is, can they do it?
I guess we'll find out. They seem to struggle against Vegas and Los Angeles.
Well, who
So
doesn't struggle against Vegas, to be honest?
that is also very true.
Not that I'm bitter or anything.
That one hurts. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I hate Vegas as much as I do, just as a result of that first year that they were in the league.
Playoffs, yeah, playoff rivalries last for a while, even
Hmm.
after they're over.
Oh, absolutely. But I guess the last question that we have on this before we move into Bombers news, but is this really the make or break point for the Jets this year? Talking about like certain stretches of schedule. This one, you have two teams in this. I don't want to call it a complete road trip because the last game against Minnesota, but in this upcoming stretch, two of these teams have everything to play for. And they're essentially playing with house money at this point because it's like, okay, well, if we lose this upcoming stretch, we're bad enough that we could just tank, trade away some guys, and build for the future. Whereas the Jets are in that position that they're kind of in that have to win now because they can't really tank at this point. They've had too good of a stretch, and they've already mortgaged some draft picks to pick up a guy well before the deadline. And then the other team in this stretch is one of the top teams in the league in Vancouver. So is this really going to be the make or break point for the Jets this season?
I I think it would help them get back on track if they could win 2 out of these 3, especially, as I've been saying this whole time, remind yourself that you can score more than 1 goal a game. If you can do
Mm-hmm.
that, if you can get that feeling back, if you can start making a run where you're scoring 3 a game, your defense is good enough to hold teams under that. You can win games 3-2 if you have to, but it's really, really hard to win 1-0 games all the time.
Even with
So
the
if you
goalie
find
tandem that we have.
Yes, even with that, it's possible with that goalie tandem. It's just not easy. Um, just if they can remind themselves what it feels like to have more than, and they're already starting with San Jose. It looked a lot better than it has. They could find if they could find their feet under them again with Monahan in the lineup, with some changes that are going on in the games. They're seeing some new line strategies. If they could find one that clicks, like the Lions did when Connor was out, let's be honest, when he was out, they were on fire for some reason. If they
Yeah.
could find something that clicks like that, then we could start sitting here talking about, do we finish first place? But if they can't find anything, if they can't find sustainable scoring, we're going to be sitting here in April going, well, it's too bad that we're out of this already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this will be pretty important for them. I don't think it's the make or break point, but I think it's very important these next couple of games to really make that difference and set that trajectory for the end of the season.
Yeah, because
Um,
they're pulling out of the little dive they were doing. They were starting to fade a bit, and now they're starting to get it back on track. So let's keep it that way.
yep, and I mean all win streaks start with one win, and then you build the next one, of course,
Now you have
which they've
two.
got two. So, I mean, hey, maybe, like I said, I think that we'll get on the road trip portion, I think that we'll get 3 or 4 points, but been wrong before. Maybe we can get 4 out of 4. So, 0 out of 4 is not acceptable, though.
I'll take 4 out of 6 in this 3-game stretch.
I
That'll
think
be
that sounds fair.
that'll keep us that'll keep us in that'll keep us where we're trying to head.
Exactly. And now you got some Bombers news to talk about, Joe.
Yeah, just a touch. Really, what we were talking about last week with the Ed Hervey Memorial tampering window. Um, the players that we thought are gone are gone. The players we kept some of the players we didn't think we're going to keep. It's going to be a win overall for keeping the core together. On the other hand, we found out over the past day or so that Rasheed Bailey and Jeff Gray are no longer in consideration to be brought back. I think Bailey hurts because he does a lot of the little things right. But then we talk about Jeff Gray, who was our left guard last season. They're letting him go so they don't have to pay him starter money because they've got both Liam Dobson and Tui behind him to take that spot. They're also working on trying to refill that left tackle or the right tackle spot, and there's also a corner spot out there to be had as well. and both of those are likely going to be players we've never heard of before. Because the one thing I've learned about the CFL is that it's sometimes the signings that that flash across the feed. You look, it's players you've never heard of because they're from smaller schools, and then by July you know their name because they've gone and taken a starting spot. So it's going to be those positions are probably going to be taken by those types of players. They also did lose Malik Clements from the linebacking core. They did bring back Shane Gauthier, who's been fantastic on special teams for years, and Bombers fans will remember that tackle he made on that punt return late in the 2019 West Final. If he doesn't make that tackle, they might not win.
We
They
have a
might not
Grey
go to
Cup.
the cup that year. Right. Jesse Briggs did file his retirement papers though, so he same vein of player, but he is moving on with his life at this point. So not a lot of big positive things beyond Oliveira and Schoen coming back. The Bombers haven't signed anybody off of anybody else's roster, no big splashes. But considering how well they've kept the core together, they didn't need to do that.
And I mean, keeping a core together is a big thing for chemistry too. Like I think that they have some older guys in this core too, but I have a good feeling that you at least kept that together because I feel like if you kind of blew it up now, we've been saying about how 2025 Grey Cup is going to be that last hurrah, so to speak, for this core. And if we
Right.
were
For the
to,
Big Hills, for the Jeffersons, for Coloros, for
Mhm.
Stanley Bryant, possibly. And we may lose a couple of those players over next off season because Jackson Jeffcoat announced his retirement. He's not going to be back. There's there's players from that foundation that are coming off ones and twos at a time, but I could see the rest of that group all disappearing after 2025.
Right. But I just, with we're kind of in a Buffalo Bills situation now, aside from 2019. You love to say 2020 Grey Cup champs.
And
Just
2021, so there's two of them there.
yeah,
And you were a drive away twice for the last two, so saying that they're a favorite for 2024 isn't outlandish.
mm, I mean it's I just I want to see them actually finish. It
You're
would be
telling
nice.
me.
What's that?
You're telling me because I got cold pretty quickly after those drives.
Yeah. But it would be nice to see that and knowing that after we blow this core up, it's probably going to be a couple of dark years. I mean, as Bomber fans, we've gone through some very dark years before, some very long stretches of dark years too. Uh, so like it's coming, but you just want to see something special at I'm calling it the throne room. You want to see something special at the throne room in 2025.
Yeah. Or even one more in 2024, even if it doesn't go well in 2025. Just one more. One more would
Mhm.
make this feel a lot better.
Yeah, but I guess that remains to be seen too. They got the talent. That's for sure.
They do. They've got the talent. They've got the coaching staff. They have the front office staff. They got a job to do again. It's hard to climb that mountain over and over and over again. It's just they got two more cracks at the can or kicks at the can with this group. Let's see if they can make something of it.
So I saw something that was interesting. That it's of course speculation. Do I really think it's going to happen? No, but I need to get your input on this. Where you think he would fit in the most in the league? But after the Steelers released Mitch Trubisky, he was an experiment. Chicago traded up for him. He was average, I would say in Chicago. I wouldn't say he was above average, especially for as high of a draft pick as he was. Buffalo, he was not good, and somehow he was way worse going into Pittsburgh. Now, the rumor that I saw is okay. Well, Trubisky going to the CFL or the USFL would make sense because it doesn't seem like he can crack it in the NFL. And some guys are great college quarterbacks that just can't crack it in the NFL. Terrell Pryor comes to mind for that. But if Trubisky were to go to the CFL, where do you think he would fit the most?
The answer's nowhere. But I mean, I could see a team like Hamilton that has nothing beyond Bo and Taylor Powell. Maybe. I don't think that's a this year thing. I think that's
Oh, it's not a
okay.
this year thing.
Trubisky doesn't have an NFL job in 2024. Well, let's see. I will say one of the worst CFL quarterbacks I've seen in the decade of watching most of the games. I mean, I would say I watched
Don't say
between 50
Johnny
and 60
Manziel.
of the games. No, like there was something there, but he wasn't ready to do it. Basically, it was more of a personal thing than a talent thing.
Sure.
One of the worst CFL quarterbacks I have seen, just based off of what I've seen of him in the CFL, and of course what he was doing in the NFL, was Ryan Lindley.
Mm.
He came from there was that one year where Carson Palmer went down in Arizona, and they had like
Yep.
6 other quarterbacks, and Lindley was one of them. Not great, but got a chance in Ottawa, and no, just no. Like, nope, you don't belong here. Nope, you don't fit.
That was like so that I was talking about great college quarterbacks that just couldn't crack it in the NFL. That almost in a way reminds me going back to the Terrell Pryor thing. He was obviously fantastic at Ohio State. Gets his chance, does not play very well at all. So, I mean, very, very fast. So that wasn't an issue. And I feel like in today's game, he probably would be pretty all right, at least. Maybe not great, but he did get his chance at wide receiver. That didn't go well either.
No,
Poor guy.
no. Yeah, just sometimes there's more to it than just the physical skill.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the wrong coaching, you could even take a guy that's got the physical skill and the mental skill and break him. So it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to tell sometimes who's at fault when a player falters like that. But yeah, sometimes the wrong situation is the worst thing you could possibly have happen as a player.
Makes me think of Jamarcus Russell. Who dropped the ball on that one?
Yes. I mean, that was like Al Davis trying to make, still back in 1977, going, let's find the fastest players we could find. It's like everybody else caught up to you like 20 years ago. Like, figure it out.
Yeah. Oh man, that's Jamarcus Russell, one of the biggest busts of all time. Maybe not the biggest, but he's like a
He's on the short list.
yes. I would well, I guess this is maybe something that we could do for our landing segment then. We'll talk about busts, and I guess we talked about Jamarcus Russell, but who in your opinion, I have mine already set, but who do you think is, in your opinion, one of the biggest NHL draft busts? Do
There's
you
a
want me to
few.
go through mine first while you think about it?
I've got 2 names off the top of my head, but go ahead, because I'm sure I'll match.
I was going to say one of them is probably going to match, and I have Nail Yakupov at the top of the list.
That was one.
Who was your other one?
I mean, the other one, just based off of hype. I mean, he had a decent career, but hype and what he said as he came in was Alexander Daigle way back when. Like,
Yep.
nobody's gonna remember who's number 2, except number 2 is Chris Pronger. So
Yeah, who's Chris Pronger? I don't think I've ever heard of him before.
alternate universe, I guess, right?
Oh yeah. Oh man, yeah, I would have to say those two are certainly up there. My favorite thing about Yakupov was that he got his chance with a couple teams too, and just couldn't do it. And I mean, you feel bad for the guy, but at the end of the day, you're that good to get drafted that early, first overall. You know, you got to show up when the lights are on, and there's just some guys that can't do it.
And there's just one more thing about NHL drafting that makes it, well, multiple things, but harder than other sports is that you also have culture shock.
Yeah.
Changing the culture that you're in. All of a sudden, you have a ton of money, but you don't know the language. For
Hmm.
some players, that's the end of the line. So,
And no, not I'm not trying to throw him in with the draft bust category yet, but one player who thought I would hear a lot more about after he got drafted. I mean, you hear about him every so often now, but Alexis Lafreniere, I thought I would hear a lot more about him than I do. A couple years in now, but I'm not calling him a bust. But I just think that I
no.
would.
And that has a whole nother level of that's a whole nother level to it, but
Mhm.
the hype meter is very low at this point for that, especially given the market he's in.
Yeah, seriously. I was thinking like, draft day, like, oh, this guy he's not gonna be a Sidney Crosby-esque type player, but he's gonna be, the topic of conversation a lot of times. And he's just another player in the league now. And of course, these guys are playing at a level that I can only dream of, if
Right.
that
And
even.
really, that makes you a successful first round draft pick.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just when you have that label, the number one label, there's generational expectations when there's only a few generational players at any given time.
Hmm. And sometimes too, you have your draft classes that might not be as deep as others. So it's like if you're in a average draft class, so to speak, you're the first overall. Well, in other draft classes, you might be 10th overall.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's just that
Or you could have a
whole
really
label.
top heavy draft where the first three are generational potential, and everybody else is, well, you could be fourth to 20th and you're the same guy. So good luck figuring out
Pretty
who's who.
much. Hmm. Well, you got any closing thoughts, Joe?
Beyond just sitting here and waiting to have answers on whether the Jets could get back on a roll and how the Bombers are going to fill these spots. I've just been going to sit here and ponder those for a while. That's all I've got.
I think that we'll at least get the Jets answers by next week.
We will.
Maybe.
The Bombers' answer is going to take a little longer.
Yeah. So, but we'll get them eventually, and that's what we're here for at the Winnipeg terminal, right?
Yep, we'll have answers, even if we don't know the questions sometimes.
This is very true, and there's a lot of them out there. Well, this is the Winnipeg terminal. We are clear for landing for the dub. Go Jets, go.